Very good morning to you, ladies and gentlemen, and I've been told that it's going to be 12 minutes, so 12 minutes it is. The future of management education, according to me, we are moving towards an autodidactic world, which means that the participants are going to choose what they want to learn, and the business schools are going to be mere enablers. And so far as the skills are concerned, there's been a lot of talk about the fourth industrial revolution. Professor Sahusra Buddhe spoke about it, Errol spoke about it, but what we have come up with that there are certain critical skills which are going to be required by the leaders of tomorrow. Oh, everybody seems to be pointing at that, but that's not the institution that I represent. I come from IIM Indore. So some of the skills which are required in the future are critical thinking, sense-making, negotiation, ethical decision-making, and empathy. And therefore, when we talk about leadership in management education as well as leadership at an individual level, I think the leadership paradigm is going to shift. Earlier, whenever we thought of leaders as either heroes or martyrs. The entire conceptualization of a leader in our heads used to be a person sitting on a horse, preferably black or white, usually a male. And the entire premise of leadership was कि भाई लहू बहना चाहिए. या तो इस व्यक्ति के हाथों अन्य लोगों का अथवा इस व्यक्ति का for the sake of a cause. So therefore, we looked at as a leader either as a hero or a martyr, and then we came up with several theories of leadership. We said leaders are born, we said situation creates leaders, we said there are certain behaviors which can produce leaders, so on and so forth, the transactional and the transformational and so on and so forth. But there's going to be this entire shift in the paradigm, and what we are going to get now and in the future is something that I call the be, know, do framework of leaders and leadership institutions. Now, what do you want to be? You need to be a kinesthetic communicator as a leader, and likewise, your institution needs to be a kinesthetic communicator. What do I mean by that? You know, many people, when it comes to communication, everybody thinks of themselves as Abhimanyus. कि ये तो माँ के पेट से सीख के आए हैं. But the truth is, just like Abhimanyu, आधा सीख के आए हैं. बाकी आधा इस विश्व में रह के सीखना पड़ता है. And therefore, if you look at what real communication means, there's a very interesting definition of communication which has been given in Rigved, which says, Samani va akuti samana hridayani va samanamastu vo mana yata vasu sahasati. That heart, mind, and intellect, these are the three entities which participate in communication between a sender and a receiver. And when the heart, mind, and intellect of the receiver become the same as that of the sender, then communication has happened. And therefore, to achieve that, first of all, you as a leader should be saying exactly the same thing with your heart, mind, and intellect. For example, if I come here and say, hey, I never get angry. Now, I'm saying I never get angry, but clearly, my expression is that of anger. And therefore, the real communication can never happen. And when it comes to the institution, therefore, what I have realized, and we, including the IIMs, mea culpa, we are all guilty of it. We create knowledge, we disseminate knowledge, we don't practice knowledge. And therefore, one of the things that IIM Indore has decided to do is to practice what we preach. We give gyan to the rest of the world, but we tend to forget all of that when it comes to administration in our own institutions, and therefore, we are going to practice what we preach. The next is when we talk about sense-making, we must understand that it is not data which tells us what is good, it is information. And these are two completely different things. Data and information are two completely different things. Data is raw figures and facts, defined in a very narrow context, whereas information is something which is useful and meaningful. For example, let's say you're driving and you realize you're lost. You see a man walking by on the road, you stop your car next to him and say, excuse me, could you please help me, I'm lost. Could you tell me where I am? And that Charlie tells you, you are in a car, parked approximately 2 meters off the center line of the road and facing west. You are between 26 and 27 degrees north latitude and between 80 and 81 degrees east longitude. Thank you very much, you say. I'm sure that everything that you've told me is correct, but I have no idea what to make of it, and the point is, I'm still lost. Why? Because all that was given to you was data and not information. So how do you differentiate between data and information? And the philosophy says there is a 4-filter test. Ask yourself, is it accurate? Is it complete? Is it timely? And is it relevant? So in the previous example, it was accurate, it was timely, you got the response immediately, it was complete, to the extent this person knew, but it was not relevant. And therefore, as business institutions, as management institutions, we have to give people something which is relevant, something which is information and not data. But this is the B part. The second is the know part. And what do I mean by know? Know yourself. When it comes to an institution, the institution is known by its mission statement. But when it comes to leaders, you yourself, do you know yourself? For example, I have this very superficial level of identity. Ask me, who are you? I'll say I'm Himanshu, the director of IIM Indore. Now that's my most superficial level of identity because I'm drawing it from a particular position which will not remain 4 years and 2 months from now. And therefore, please remember, the moment you start associating your self-worth with your designation, you are treading a very, very dangerous line because the day the designation goes, so will your sense of self-worth. And therefore, this is your most superficial level of identity. So therefore, when you ask me, who are you? I'll say, I'm a teacher, because that is where I derive my passion from. Or I'll say, I'm a mountaineer, because that is where I derive my passion from. But then, this is only the second level of identity. There's a third level of identity. And that third level of identity is Aham Brahmasmi. And Aham Brahmasmi does not mean that I'm God. What it means is that I'm a part of the larger consciousness. And by being a part of the larger consciousness, we owe something to the society, to the world around me, and the business institutions in the future will have to do that. For example, at IIM Indore, we have something called a rural engagement program, where our students go, reside in villages. They live in the villages for a week, and then talk about the problems that those villages face, and then offer solutions and own those solutions even after they graduate. 833 million people in India out of the 1.33 billion live in villages. We cannot be a good management institution unless we address the problems as well as the aspirations of those 833 million. And finally, the last part is do. What do you need to do? Do the right thing. We have to do the right thing, which means we have to talk about ethics in our business schools. And by the way, when I talk about ethics, I don't mean morality. There are multiple people who can tell you about morality. Morality is the difference between good and bad. You have your family, you have your religion, you have the Babas who are still not in the jail. All of them can tell you everything about the difference between the good and bad. But what we need to talk about is the difference between the right and the wrong. When morality gets contextualized, that is when it becomes the question of right and wrong. And therefore, I'll end with my favorite story from my favorite book, and that happens to be the Mahabharata, which I also used to do my PhD. How many of you know Karna, the character in Mahabharata, the firstborn of Kunti? The firstborn of Kunti, born with the blessings of sun god, whatever that means. Karna was a very cursed man, बहुत श्रापित व्यक्ति था. महाभारत काल में बहुत सारे लोग थे जिनका काम ही था श्राप देना, क्रोधित होकर घूमते रहते थे. दुर्वासा, परशुराम, श्राप, श्राप, श्राप. और महाभारत काल में जिसको श्राप देना आता था, उसने कर्ण को श्राप दिया हुआ था. So that was his destiny. Now we fast forward to day 17 of the Mahabharata, when Karna is having a duel with Arjun, and while having that duel, the wheel of his chariot gets stuck in the mud. Now, there was a shrap behind it again, but we're not going to talk about that shrap. So Karna, first of all, told his Sarthi that, look, my wheel is stuck, why don't you get it out? The Sarthi was Shalya. Shalya immediately showed him his JD. Dekho, ispe nahi likha mere job description pe. Not going down. So Karna said, all right. So he went down, he tried to take his wheel out. Meanwhile, Arjun continued to shoot arrows at him. So Karna said, Arjun, can't you see that I'm unarmed? Relax. Let me take out the wheel, and then you can start the duel. So Arjun got a little embarrassed. He was going to put down his bow and arrow when Krishna admonished him, Are Murkh, Shatru ki baat sun rahe ho? Samne Shatru hai, baan maro. Arjun got up again and started shooting arrows. This time, Karna got very serious. And he said, Arjun, aren't you even embarrassed about how history is going to judge you? Aren't you even thinking about what posterity is going to write about you? Where is your Kshatriya dharma? And this time, Arjun was very embarrassed. So he looked at Krishna, kya boss, and he put his bow and arrow down. And this time, Krishna knew that speaking to Arjun would be futile, so instead, he addressed Karna. And he said, Karna, how dare you talk about dharma? Where was your dharma when Draupadi was being disrobed? Where was your dharma when Pandavas were almost killed and burnt in the Lakshagra? Where was your dharma when on day 13 of the Mahabharata, 6 of you got together to kill that Balak Abhimanyu? How dare you talk about dharma? And that's when Karna realizes all the curses that he had gotten in his life and the reasons behind all of those curses, and he smiles. And he says, Arjun, you heard Krishna. Don't worry about the good and bad. Just worry about doing the right thing, because what Krishna is saying is the right thing to do. And therefore, Arjun picks up his bow and arrow again and starts shooting arrows, one of which takes Karna's head with it. The moral of the story is that we as business schools, we as management education institutions, try to become a little pontificative. We try to become normative, trying to do a moral policing of our students. The future is not going to allow us to do that. What we have to inculcate is telling our students what is the right thing to do, and to do so, we have to do the right things. It's time business institutions started not misreporting things just to make sure that their brand value goes high. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, 20 seconds, my final words for you. Please note, the past may have belonged to those leaders and to those institutions who did things well. But the future is going to belong to those institutions and those leaders who not only do things well, but also do the right things. Thank you very much.